The night was quiet at Memorial Hospital until the ambulance sirens broke through the silence. Maya Thompson looked up from her paperwork at the nurse's station. She had been working as an emergency room nurse for 8 years, and she knew that sound meant someone's life was hanging by a thread. The automatic doors burst open. Paramedics rushed in, pushing a stretcher at full speed. On it lay a man in a police uniform, his face pale and covered in sweat. Blood soaked through the white bandages on his stomach. "Gunshot wound to the abdomen," one paramedic shouted. "He's lost a lot of blood. Blood pressure is dropping fast." Maya jumped into action. She was the senior nurse on duty that night, and the ER was short-staffed. 2 nurses had called in sick, and the doctor was handling another critical patient. It was just her and one junior nurse for now. She moved quickly to the trauma bay, preparing the equipment they would need. Her hands worked fast, setting up IV lines and getting the monitoring equipment ready. Years of training had taught her to stay calm, even when her heart was racing. The paramedics wheeled the officer into the bay. Maya stepped forward to help transfer him to the hospital bed. That's when she got her first good look at his face. He was a white man, probably in his early 40s, with short brown hair. His name tag read Sullivan. As they moved him onto the bed, Officer Sullivan's eyes fluttered open. He looked confused and scared. His eyes moved around the room until they landed on Maya's face. For a moment, their eyes met. Then something changed in his expression. His face twisted with anger and disgust. Despite the bullet in his body and the fact that he was dying, he managed to speak. "Get away from me," he said, his voice weak but filled with hate. "I don't want you touching me." Maya felt like she had been slapped. She knew exactly what he meant. She had seen that look before in her 35 years of life. It was the same look she got sometimes at the grocery store. The same look that made people cross the street when they saw her coming. "Sir, I'm your nurse. I'm here to help you," Maya said, keeping her voice professional and calm. "I said get away." Sullivan tried to push her hand away, but he was too weak. "Get me a different nurse. I want someone else. Anyone but her." The other staff members in the room went silent. The junior nurse, a young woman named Kelly, stared with wide eyes. One of the paramedics shook his head in disbelief. Maya felt her chest tighten. She thought about her son at home, just 10 years old, sleeping peacefully. She thought about her mother, who had marched in the civil rights movement. She thought about every time someone had made her feel less than human because of the color of her skin. But she also thought about her oath as a nurse. She had promised to care for every patient, no matter who they were or what they believed. "Kelly, check his vitals," Maya said, her voice steady even though her hands wanted to shake. She wouldn't let him see her hurt. She wouldn't give him that. The monitor began beeping faster. Sullivan's blood pressure was dropping dangerously low. His face was getting even paler. "We're losing him," Kelly said, panic in her voice. Maya looked at the monitor, then at Sullivan's face. He was still conscious, still looking at her with hatred in his eyes. In that moment, she had a choice to make. She could step back. She could let someone else handle this. No one would blame her. He had made it clear he didn't want her help, but Maya knew that stepping back meant he would probably die. Kelly was too inexperienced to handle this alone. The doctor was still with another patient. "Every second counted. We need to stop the bleeding and get blood into him now," Maya said, making her decision. She moved to Sullivan's side, ignoring the way he tried to turn his head away from her. Her hands moved with practiced skill, inserting the IV line into his arm. Sullivan tried to pull away, but he was too weak. Maya worked quickly, hooking up the bags of fluids and medications. "Call the surgeon," she told Kelly. "Tell them we have a gunshot wound that needs immediate surgery. And get 4 units of blood from the blood bank. Run." Kelly rushed out of the room. Maya was alone with Sullivan and one paramedic who was finishing his report. "Why are you doing this?" Sullivan whispered, his voice getting weaker. "I don't want you here." Maya looked down at him. She could have said so many things. She could have told him about the hurt his words caused. She could have walked away and let him face the consequences of his hatred. Instead, she simply said, "Because it's my job to save lives. Even yours." Sullivan's eyes closed. The monitor began alarming loudly. His heart rate was irregular. "He's going into shock," the paramedic said. Maya increased the flow of the IV fluids. She elevated his legs to help blood flow to his vital organs. She checked the bandages on his wound, applying more pressure to slow the bleeding. The doctor finally rushed in, still wearing gloves from the previous patient. "What do we have?" Maya gave him a quick report, listing all of Sullivan's vital signs and everything they had done so far. The doctor nodded, impressed by how much she had accomplished in such a short time. Good work, Maya. Let's get him stabilized enough for surgery. For the next hour, Maya worked without stopping. She ignored the ache in her feet and the hunger in her stomach. She ignored the memory of Sullivan's hateful words. She focused only on keeping him alive. Kelly returned with the blood, and Maya carefully monitored each transfusion. She watched the monitors like a hawk, ready to respond to any change. She adjusted medications, checked and rechecked his vital signs, and coordinated with the surgical team. At one point, Sullivan opened his eyes again. He looked at Maya, and for just a second she thought she saw confusion in his expression, as if he couldn't understand why she was still there, still fighting to save him. Then the moment passed, and his eyes closed again. Finally, the surgical team was ready. They wheeled Sullivan toward the operating room. As they moved past her, Maya felt the exhaustion hit her all at once. Her legs felt weak and her hands were shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. Kelly touched her arm gently. "Maya, are you okay?" "What he said to you." That was horrible. Maya took a deep breath. "I'm fine," she said, though she wasn't sure if that was true. "Let's clean up this bay. We'll probably have more patients coming in soon." But as she cleaned up the bloody gauze and used supplies, Maya couldn't stop thinking about the hate in Sullivan's eyes. She wondered if he would survive the surgery. Part of her hoped he would, not for his sake, but because she needed to know that she had made the right choice, that her humanity was stronger than his hatred. She didn't know it then, but this night would change both of their lives forever. The surgery took 4 hours. Maya stayed at the hospital even though her shift was supposed to end at midnight. It was now 3 in the morning and she sat in the break room, drinking cold coffee that tasted like cardboard. She couldn't go home. Not yet. She needed to know if Sullivan would make it. Kelly came into the break room and sat down beside her. "Maya, you should go home. Get some rest." "I'm fine," Maya said, though dark circles were forming under her eyes. "You've been here for 12 hours. Your shift ended 3 hours ago." Maya didn't answer. How could she explain that she needed to see this through? That walking away now would feel like giving up? Like letting his hatred win? The door opened again and Dr. Chen, the surgeon, walked in. He looked tired but satisfied. "He made it through surgery," he said. "It was touch and go for a while, but he's stable now. We got the bullet out and repaired the damage. He'll need to stay in ICU for a few days, but he should recover." Maya felt a wave of relief wash over her. Then she felt angry at herself for feeling relieved. Why should she care if this man lived or died? He had made it clear what he thought of her. "There's something else," Dr. Chen said, looking directly at Maya. While he was under anesthesia, his wife arrived. "She's in the waiting room. She's asking about the nurse who saved her husband's life in the ER." Maya's stomach tightened. "Did anyone tell her what he said to me?" Dr. Chen shook his head. "No, that's your story to tell, not ours." Maya stood up slowly. Her body ached from exhaustion, but she knew what she had to do. "I'll go talk to her." The waiting room was quiet except for the hum of the vending machines. A woman sat alone in the corner, her face buried in her hands. She looked to be about 40 years old, with blonde hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She wore pajama pants and a jacket, like she had rushed out of the house in a panic. "Mrs. Sullivan?" Maya said softly. The woman's head snapped up. Her eyes were red and swollen from crying. "Yes, are you a nurse?" "Is my husband okay?" "Yes, ma'am." "I'm Maya Thompson. I was your husband's nurse in the emergency room. Dr. Chen just came from surgery. Your husband made it through. He's stable now." Mrs. Sullivan stood up so fast she almost fell. Maya reached out to steady her. The woman grabbed Maya's hands, holding them tight. "Thank you," she sobbed. "Thank you so much. They told me he was dying when he came in. They said he might not make it." Tears streamed down her face. "We have 2 daughters. They're at home with my mother. I didn't know how I was going to tell them their father was gone." Maya felt a lump form in her throat. She thought about her own son, and how she would feel if something happened to her. She thought about these 2 girls who had no idea their father had said such hateful things to the woman who saved his life. "The surgeon did most of the work," Maya said, trying to pull her hands away gently. But Mrs. Sullivan held on tighter. "No, the paramedics told me what you did. They said you worked on him for over an hour before surgery. They said you wouldn't give up even when things looked bad." Maya nodded slowly. "It's my job, ma'am." "It's more than a job," Mrs. Sullivan said. It's a gift. You have a gift for helping people. She finally let go of Maya's hands and wiped her eyes. I'm sorry, I'm a mess. I can't stop thinking about what would have happened if you weren't there tonight. Maya thought about telling her the truth. About the slurs her husband had said. About the hatred in his eyes. But looking at this woman's tear-stained face, at her shaking hands and desperate relief, Maya couldn't do it. This woman had almost lost her husband. She didn't need more pain tonight. He's going to need a lot of care and rest, Maya said instead, but he should make a full recovery. Mrs. Sullivan hugged her suddenly, catching Maya off guard. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for saving him. Maya stood stiffly in the embrace, not sure what to do with her arms. Finally, she patted the woman's back awkwardly. You're welcome. After Mrs. Sullivan went to see her husband in the ICU, Maya finally left the hospital. The sun was starting to rise as she walked to her car. The parking lot was mostly empty. She sat in the driver's seat for a long moment, staring at nothing. Then the tears came. They poured out of her like a dam had broken. She cried for the hurt she felt when Sullivan looked at her with disgust. She cried for every time someone had made her feel like she was less than human. She cried for the exhaustion of always having to be the bigger person, of always having to prove she was worthy of basic respect. She cried until there were no more tears left. Then she started her car and drove home through the quiet morning streets. Her house was dark when she arrived. Her husband David had left for his construction job an hour ago, but her son Jerome was still asleep. Maya walked quietly to his room and opened the door a crack. He was 10 years old, sleeping peacefully with his favorite stuffed bear tucked under his arm. Maya stood there watching him breathe, thinking about the world he would grow up in. Would men like Officer Sullivan look at her son with that same hatred? Would people judge him before they even knew his name? She thought about Mrs. Sullivan's daughters, sleeping peacefully in their own beds, not knowing how close they came to losing their father. Did those girls learn hate from their father? Or could they grow up to be different? Maya closed the door softly and went to her own room. She sat on the bed, still in her scrubs, and pulled out her phone. She had 17 missed calls and dozens of text messages. Word had spread quickly through the hospital about what had happened. One text was from her best friend Shauna, who worked in the pediatric ward. Girl, I heard what happened. Are you okay? Call me. Another was from her mother. Baby, Kelly told me what that officer said to you. I'm so proud of you for staying professional, but I'm also sad that you had to go through that. Come by for dinner this week. I love you. Maya wanted to respond, but she was too tired. She lay back on the bed, still fully clothed, and closed her eyes, but sleep wouldn't come. Every time she started to drift off, she saw Sullivan's face twisted with hate. She thought about the choice she had made. Would she make the same choice again? Even knowing that he hated her for the color of her skin, would she still fight to save his life? The answer came to her clearly, yes, because that's what separated her from him. He saw her as less than human, but she saw him as a life worth saving. That was the difference between them, but knowing she had made the right choice didn't make it hurt any less. Around noon, David came home early from work. He found Maya still lying on the bed, staring at the ceiling. Shauna called me, he said, sitting down beside her. She told me what happened. David was a big man, 6 feet tall with strong hands from years of construction work. But his voice was gentle as he took Maya's hand. I'm sorry, baby. I'm sorry you had to go through that. I saved his life, Maya said, her voice flat. He hated me for the color of my skin, and I saved his life anyway. I know you did, because you're a better person than he is. I don't feel better. I feel tired. I'm so tired, David. He pulled her close, and she rested her head on his chest. You don't have to be strong all the time, he said. Not here. Not with me. So Maya let herself be weak for a little while. She let her husband hold her while she tried to make sense of what had happened. She didn't know that in a hospital room across town, Officer Sullivan was waking up from surgery. She didn't know that his wife was telling him about the nurse who had saved his life. And she didn't know that when Mrs. Sullivan described that nurse, Sullivan's blood would run cold as he remembered the hateful words he had said. Officer Sullivan opened his eyes slowly. Everything hurt. His stomach felt like it was on fire, and his mouth was dry as sandpaper. The bright lights of the hospital room made him squint. James? Oh, thank God you're awake. He turned his head carefully and saw his wife Sarah sitting in a chair beside his bed. Her eyes were red and puffy. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. What happened? His voice came out as a weak whisper. You were shot, Sarah said, taking his hand carefully, avoiding the IV line. During that traffic stop. Do you remember? Pieces of memory came back slowly. The traffic stop. The young man he had pulled over for a broken taillight. The flash of a gun. The burning pain in his stomach. Then nothing but darkness and confusion. How long have I been here? He asked. 3 days. You've been in and out of consciousness since the surgery. But this is the first time you've really been awake and talking. Sarah wiped her eyes. James, they said you almost died. If it wasn't for the nurse in the emergency room, you wouldn't have made it to surgery. Something stirred in the back of Sullivan's mind. A memory that felt like a bad dream. The emergency room? Yes, the paramedics said you were dying when you arrived. But this nurse, she worked on you for over an hour. She wouldn't give up. Dr. Chen said she saved your life before they could even get you to surgery. Sullivan felt a cold dread spreading through his chest. This nurse, what did she look like? Sarah smiled. I met her that first night. She was so kind to me even though she looked exhausted. She's a black woman, maybe mid-30s. Her name is Maya Thompson. She stayed hours past her shift, just to make sure you made it through surgery. James, she's an angel. The room seemed to spin. It wasn't a bad dream. It was real. The memories came flooding back with terrible clarity. The nurse's face looking down at him. The hatred he had felt in that moment. The words he had said. The disgust in his voice when he told her to get away from him. James, what's wrong? Should I call the doctor? Sarah leaned forward, worried by the look on his face. No, he managed to say. I'm tired, but that was a lie. He wasn't tired. He was horrified, ashamed, sick to his stomach, and not from the gunshot wound. Sarah stayed with him for another hour, talking about their daughters and how worried everyone had been. Sullivan barely heard her. His mind was stuck on the image of Maya's face, calm and professional even as he spewed hatred at her. She had saved his life. After everything he said, she had fought to keep him alive. When Sarah finally went home to shower and check on the girls, Sullivan was left alone with his thoughts. He stared at the ceiling, trying to make sense of what had happened. He thought about his father, who had raised him in a small town where the black families lived on one side of the tracks and the white families lived on the other. His father had taught him that some people were better than others, that the color of your skin determined your worth. Sullivan had joined the police force at 22, and he'd brought those beliefs with him. He'd never thought of himself as a bad cop. He'd never planted evidence or beaten anyone. But he'd stopped people for driving in the wrong neighborhood. He'd been rougher with some suspects than others. He'd looked the other way when his partner made racist jokes. He'd told himself he was just doing his job, just keeping people safe. But lying in that hospital bed, he couldn't hide from the truth anymore. He was a racist. He had hated someone for the color of her skin, and that same person had saved his life. 2 days later, Detective Mike Rodriguez from his precinct came to visit. Rodriguez was an old friend, someone Sullivan had worked with for years. Hey man, good to see you awake, Rodriguez said, pulling up a chair. You had us all worried there for a while. Thanks for coming, Sullivan said. He was sitting up now, though it still hurt to move. We got the guy who shot you. Turns out he had warrants for armed robbery. The gun was stolen. Rodriguez shook his head. You're lucky to be alive. Yeah, lucky. Rodriguez looked at him carefully. You okay? You seem, I don't know, different. Sullivan took a deep breath. It hurt his stomach, but he needed to ask. Mike, did you hear anything about what happened in the ER when they brought me in? Rodriguez shifted uncomfortably in his chair. I heard some things. Why? What did you hear? Look, man, you were in pain. You were dying. Nobody's judging you for... What did you hear? Sullivan interrupted, his voice harder now. Rodriguez sighed. The paramedics talked. They said you gave your nurse a hard time, said some things you shouldn't have, but they also said she saved your life anyway, so no harm done, right? No harm done, Sullivan repeated quietly. Mike, I called her slurs. I told her I didn't want her touching me because she was black, and then she spent the next hour making sure I lived. Rodriguez looked uncomfortable. Like I said, you were dying. You weren't thinking straight. I was thinking exactly straight. That's the problem. Sullivan looked at his friend. How many times have we pulled someone over just because they were driving in the wrong neighborhood? How many times have we treated people differently because of what they looked like? Come on, James, don't do this to yourself. You're a good cop, am I? Sullivan felt tears starting to form. A good cop doesn't hate someone for trying to save his life. Rodriguez stood up, clearly uncomfortable with the conversation. You need to rest, man. You've been through a trauma. Don't make any big decisions or start questioning everything right now. Just focus on getting better. After Rodriguez left, Sullivan lay back in his bed, but he couldn't rest. His mind wouldn't stop racing. He thought about Maya Thompson, about the professionalism she had shown even in the face of his hatred. He thought about his daughters, 13 and 15 years old. What was he teaching them? What kind of man was their father? That afternoon, a new nurse came in to check his vitals. She was a young white woman, friendly and efficient. As she worked, Sullivan gathered his courage. "Excuse me," he said. "Do you know Nurse Thompson?" "Maya Thompson?" The nurse's hands paused for just a second. "Yes, I know her. Why?" "I need to talk to her. Can you ask her to come see me?" The nurse finished checking his blood pressure before answering. "I can ask her. But Mr. Sullivan, Maya doesn't work in ICU. She works in the ER. There's no medical reason for her to come up here." "Please," Sullivan said. "Please just ask her. Tell her I need to apologize." The nurse looked at him for a long moment. "I'll tell her," she finally said. "But I can't promise she'll come. And honestly, after what I heard you said to her, I wouldn't blame her if she refused." Sullivan nodded. "I know. I wouldn't blame her either." The nurse left, and Sullivan was alone again with his shame. He didn't know if Maya would come. He didn't know what he would say if she did. How do you apologize for a lifetime of hatred? How do you thank someone for showing you mercy you didn't deserve? He reached for his phone and opened a search browser. Slowly, painfully, he typed in, "How to stop being racist." The search results filled his screen. Articles, books, videos, programs. He had never even thought to look for this kind of information before. He had never wanted to change. But lying in that hospital bed, alive only because of the compassion of a woman he had tried to reject, Sullivan realized something. He had a choice. He could go back to being the man he was before, carrying his father's hatred like a badge of honor. Or he could become someone different. Someone better. It wouldn't be easy. He knew that. Changing your beliefs after 43 years of thinking one way wasn't something that happened overnight. But he had to try, because every breath he took was a gift from Maya Thompson. And he couldn't waste that gift by staying the same man who had looked at her with hatred while she fought to keep him alive. 3 days passed with no word from Maya. Sullivan started physical therapy, taking slow, painful walks around the ICU floor. His wife visited every day, bringing their daughters once he was feeling stronger. They hugged him carefully, crying with relief that their father was alive. Looking at their young faces, Sullivan made a promise to himself. He would change, not just for Maya, but for them, so they wouldn't grow up to be like him, so they would see people as people, not as colors or categories. On the 8th day after his surgery, there was a soft knock on his door. Sullivan looked up from his lunch tray, expecting another nurse or his physical therapist. Instead, Maya Thompson stood in the doorway. She was in her scrubs, her hair pulled back, her face carefully neutral. She didn't come into the room. She just stood there waiting. Sullivan's throat went dry. After days of thinking about this moment, he suddenly had no idea what to say. Maya stood in the doorway of Sullivan's hospital room, her hand still on the door frame. She had debated for 3 days whether to answer his request to see her. Part of her wanted to ignore it completely. She owed him nothing, but another part of her, the part that had become a nurse because she wanted to help people heal, knew she needed to face him. "Come in," Sullivan said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Please." Maya stepped into the room but stayed near the door. She didn't sit down. She wanted to be able to leave quickly if she needed to. Her arms were crossed over her chest, a protective barrier between them. "Thank you for coming," Sullivan said. He tried to sit up straighter in his bed but winced from the pain. "Kelly said you wanted to apologize." Maya's voice was flat, emotionless. She wasn't going to make this easy for him. Sullivan nodded. He looked down at his hands, unable to meet her eyes. "I don't even know where to start. I'm sorry feels too small for what I said to you. For how I treated you." Maya didn't respond. She just waited, watching him struggle to find words. "You saved my life," Sullivan continued, his voice cracking. "You worked on me for over an hour even after I..." Even after the things I said to you. You could have walked away. No one would have blamed you. But you didn't. It's my job, Maya said simply. I took an oath to care for every patient. It's more than a job. You showed me more humanity than I've ever shown anyone who looks like you. Sullivan finally looked up at her, and Maya could see tears in his eyes. I was raised to hate. My father was a racist. My grandfather was a racist. I grew up thinking that's just how the world worked. That some people were better than others because of their skin color. Maya felt anger rising in her chest. And you never questioned it? Never thought maybe your father was wrong? No, Sullivan admitted. I never did. I became a cop and I brought all that hate with me. I treated people differently based on what they looked like. I told myself I was just doing my job, just keeping people safe. But I was lying to myself. How many people did you hurt? Maya asked, her voice sharp now. How many people did you pull over for no reason? How many people did you arrest who didn't deserve it? How many lives did you make harder just because you decided they weren't as human as you? Sullivan flinched at each question like they were physical blows. I don't know, too many. Way too many. And now you want me to forgive you? To make you feel better about what you've done? Maya took a step closer to his bed, her arms still crossed. You called me slurs. You looked at me like I was dirt on your shoe. And all I was trying to do was save your life. I know, Sullivan said, tears now running down his face. I know, and I'm so ashamed. I lie here every night thinking about that moment, about the look on your face. You didn't deserve that. No one deserves that. Maya felt her own eyes starting to burn with tears, but she refused to let them fall. Not in front of him. Do you have any idea what it's like? To spend every single day proving that you deserve basic respect? To work twice as hard as everyone else just to be seen as equal? To have people look at you and make assumptions before you even open your mouth? No, Sullivan said quietly. I don't. My son is 10 years old, Maya said, her voice shaking now with emotion. He's a good kid. He's smart. He's kind. He loves science and basketball and terrible jokes. But one day he's going to be a black man in America. And he's going to deal with people like you. People who see his skin color before they see his humanity. Sullivan's face crumpled. I'm sorry. God, I'm so sorry. Sorry doesn't change anything, Maya said. Sorry doesn't undo the damage you've done. Sorry doesn't protect my son from the next cop who thinks like you do. You're right, Sullivan said. You're absolutely right. An apology isn't enough. It's not even close to enough. They sat in silence for a long moment. Maya could hear the beep of Sullivan's heart monitor, the distant sound of footsteps in the hallway, the hum of the air conditioning. Finally, Sullivan spoke again. Can I tell you something? Not as an excuse, just, I want you to understand. Maya wanted to say no. She wanted to walk out of that room and never think about Officer Sullivan again. But something in his voice made her stay. What? 3 days ago, my daughter came to visit me. My youngest, Emma, she's 13. Sullivan wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. She was telling me about her friend from school, this girl named Keisha. They're best friends, always hanging out, doing homework together. Emma wanted to know if Keisha could come to her birthday party next month. And? Maya asked, though she thought she knew where this was going. And I realized that Emma doesn't see color the way I do. She just sees her friend, a girl she likes spending time with. It never even occurred to her that it might be a problem. Sullivan's voice broke. My daughter is a better person than I am. And if I don't change, if I keep being who I've always been, I'm going to poison her. I'm going to teach her to hate the way my father taught me. Maya felt something shift inside her. Not forgiveness, not yet. But maybe the smallest crack in her anger. What are you going to do about it? I've been reading, Sullivan said. Articles, books, anything I can find on my phone. About racism, about implicit bias, about how to change. I know reading a few articles doesn't make me a different person overnight. But I have to start somewhere. Why? Maya asked. Why now? Because you got caught? Because you feel guilty? Because I'm alive, Sullivan said, looking directly at her. Because you gave me a second chance whether I deserved it or not. And I can't waste that. I can't go back to being the man I was. Maya walked closer to his bed. She looked down at this man who had hated her, who had judged her based on nothing but her skin color, and she saw something she hadn't expected to see. She saw genuine remorse, genuine desire to change, but she also knew that desire wasn't enough. Actions mattered more than intentions. You want to know what I think? Maya asked. Yes, Sullivan said. Please, I think you're scared right now. I think facing death made you question everything you believed. And that's good. That's a start. Maya pulled up the chair that sat in the corner of the room and finally sat down. But being scared doesn't make you a different person. Reading a few articles doesn't make you not racist. I know that, Sullivan said. Do you? Maya leaned forward. Because here's what's going to happen. You're going to leave this hospital. You're going to go home to your comfortable life. And every day you're going to have a choice. You can choose to keep learning, keep growing, keep challenging the beliefs you were raised with. Or you can slip back into old habits because it's easier. I won't slip back, Sullivan said quickly. Don't make promises you might not keep, Maya said. Just be honest. This is going to be hard, changing your whole worldview. Everything you were taught growing up is one of the hardest things a person can do. Most people can't do it. Sullivan was quiet for a moment. Then he asked, how do you do it? Do what? See past the hate. How do you look at someone like me and still see a person worth saving? Maya thought about that question. It was something she had asked herself many times over the years. I had a grandmother, she said slowly. She was born in 1935 in Mississippi. She lived through Jim Crow, through segregation, through some of the worst racism this country has ever seen. She had every reason to hate white people. But she didn't. Why not? Sullivan asked. Because she said hate was like poison. It hurt the person carrying it more than anyone else. She taught me that you can fight against injustice without letting it make you bitter. You can demand better without becoming the thing you're fighting against. Maya paused. I save people like you because that's who I choose to be. Not because you deserve it, but because I do. Sullivan was crying openly now. I don't deserve your kindness. No, you don't, Maya agreed. But I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it for me. For my son. For the world I want him to grow up in. A world where people don't judge each other by the color of their skin. I want that too, Sullivan said. I want to be part of making that world, not part of destroying it. Maya stood up. Then prove it. Not with words, but with actions. Change how you do your job. Speak up when you hear other cops saying racist things. Teach your daughters to see people as people. Actually do the work to become better. I will, Sullivan said. I promise you I will try every single day. Don't promise me, Maya said, walking toward the door. Promise yourself. Promise your daughters. Promise every person of color you meet from now on. She opened the door to leave, then paused and looked back at him. Officer Sullivan, I hope you mean what you're saying. I really do. Because the world has enough hate in it. We need people who are willing to change. Who are willing to be better. Wait, Sullivan called out as she started to leave. Can I ask you one more thing? Maya turned back. What? Why did you really come here today? You said you almost didn't. Maya considered the question. Because I wanted to look you in the eye and see if your apology was real. If you were actually sorry or just sorry you got caught being hateful. And? Sullivan asked. What did you see? I saw a man who's starting to understand the harm he's caused. Whether that understanding turns into real change remains to be seen. Maya opened the door wider. Don't thank me for saving your life, Officer Sullivan. Thank me by being worth saving. Then she walked out, leaving Sullivan alone with his thoughts and his tears and his promise to be better. As Maya walked down the hallway back to the elevator, she felt exhausted but also lighter somehow. She had faced him. She had said what needed to be said. Whether he would actually change, only time would tell, but at least she had given him the chance. Just like she had given him the chance to live. What he did with those chances was up to him now. 2 weeks after Maya's visit, Sullivan was discharged from the hospital. He went home to his family, to his house in the suburbs with the white picket fence and the basketball hoop in the driveway. Everything looked the same as when he had left it. But Sullivan felt like a completely different person. His daughters made a welcome home banner and hung it over the front door. Sarah had cleaned the whole house and made his favorite meal. Everything should have felt perfect. But Sullivan couldn't shake the weight of what he had learned about himself. That evening, after the girls went to bed, Sarah sat down beside him on the couch. You've been quiet since you came home. Are you in pain? Should I call the doctor? I'm not in physical pain, Sullivan said. He took her hand. Sarah, we need to talk about some things, about me, about who I've been. Over the next hour, Sullivan told his wife everything. About the racist things he had said to Maya. About the way he had treated people throughout his career. About the beliefs his father had taught him, and how he had never questioned them until now. Sarah listened in silence, her face growing more troubled with each confession. When he finished, she was quiet for a long time. "Say something," Sullivan finally said. "Please." "I don't know what to say," Sarah admitted. "I guess I knew you had some views that I didn't agree with. But I didn't realize how deep it went, how much it affected your work. Are you angry?" he asked. "Yes," she said honestly. "But I'm also sad. And I'm worried about what this means for our family, for our girls." "I'm going to change," Sullivan said. "I've already started. I've been reading, learning. I want to be better. For you, for Emma and Sophie, for everyone." Sarah looked at him carefully. "James, I love you. I've loved you since we were 19 years old. But love doesn't mean accepting everything about you. If you're serious about changing, I'll support you. But if this is just talk, if you go back to being who you were, I don't know if I can accept that." Her words hit him like a punch to the gut. "You'd leave me? I'd have to think about what's best for our daughters. I won't raise them in a house where hate is acceptable, where they learn to judge people by their skin color instead of their character." Sullivan realized then that Maya was right. This wasn't going to be easy. There would be consequences for the life he had lived. And he would have to prove every single day that he meant what he said about changing. 3 days later, Sullivan returned to the police station for the first time. He wasn't cleared for active duty yet, but he needed to handle some paperwork and talk to his captain about his recovery timeline. Walking into the station felt strange. Officers called out greetings, asking how he was feeling, welcoming him back. But Sullivan felt like an imposter among them. He saw the job differently now. He saw himself differently. Captain Rodriguez called him into his office. Not Mike Rodriguez, the detective who had visited him in the hospital, but Captain Thomas Rodriguez, his commanding officer. "Sullivan, good to see you up and moving," the captain said, gesturing to a chair. "How's the recovery going?" "Good, sir. Doctor says another month and I should be cleared for light duty." "Excellent. We've missed you around here." The captain shuffled some papers on his desk. "There is one thing we need to discuss, though." Sullivan's stomach tightened. "What's that?" "I received a complaint." "Well, not exactly a complaint. More like a concern." The captain looked uncomfortable. "The hospital filed an incident report about your behavior in the emergency room, about things you said to your nurse." "I see," Sullivan said quietly. The nurse herself didn't file a complaint. In fact, she specifically requested that no action be taken, but the hospital has protocols. Captain Rodriguez leaned forward. "Sullivan, I've known you for 15 years. You're a good cop, but I need to know if there's something going on here that I should be worried about." Sullivan took a deep breath. This was the moment. He could downplay it, make excuses, say he was in pain and didn't know what he was saying. Or he could tell the truth. "Captain, I need to be honest with you. I said some racist things to my nurse, things I can't take back. And it wasn't because I was in pain or confused. It was because I've been carrying around beliefs that have no place in this job. No place anywhere." The captain sat back in his chair, his expression unreadable. "Go on." "I've been doing some thinking during my recovery. About the way I've done my job. About some of the stops I've made. Some of the ways I've treated people. And I don't like what I see." Sullivan felt his hands shaking. "I want to do better. I want to be better. But I understand if there need to be consequences." Captain Rodriguez was quiet for a long moment. "Do you know why I became a cop, Sullivan?" "No, sir. Because when I was 16, a police officer saved my life. I was a kid making stupid choices, hanging out with the wrong people. One night, instead of arresting me for something minor, this cop sat me down and talked to me, told me I was better than the path I was on. He saw potential in me when everyone else just saw a troublemaker." The captain looked Sullivan in the eye. "That's what good policing is supposed to be. Seeing the humanity in people even when they're at their worst." "I haven't been doing that," Sullivan admitted. "No, you haven't. And that's a problem." The captain pulled out a file from his drawer. "I'm putting you on mandatory training. Implicit bias, community relations, de-escalation techniques. You'll complete it during your recovery, before you're cleared to return to active duty." "Yes, sir." "Thank you, sir. Don't thank me yet. I'm also assigning you to community outreach when you return. You'll spend half your time on patrol and half your time working with neighborhood programs, meeting with community members, building relationships." Sullivan nodded. "I think that's a good idea. And Sullivan, I'll be watching. One more incident like this and you're done. Not just with this department, but with law enforcement, period. Do you understand? I understand, sir. As Sullivan left the captain's office, he felt both relieved and terrified. This was his chance to change, but also his last chance. There would be no more room for error. In the break room, he ran into Mike Rodriguez, the detective who had visited him in the hospital. Mike poured himself a coffee and leaned against the counter. Heard you just came from the captain's office. How'd it go? I'm on mandatory training and community outreach when I come back. Mike shook his head. Man, I told you this would blow up. You should have just kept quiet about the whole thing. No, Sullivan said. I shouldn't have. Mike, we need to talk about some things, about the way we've been doing this job. Here we go, Mike said, rolling his eyes. You had some kind of come-to-Jesus moment in that hospital, didn't you? Maybe I did. Is that so bad? It is if you start lecturing the rest of us. We're just doing our job, Sullivan. Keeping the streets safe. Are we, though? Sullivan lowered his voice. Or are we just harassing people who look different from us? Making their lives harder for no reason? Mike set down his coffee cup hard. You know what? You've changed. And not in a good way. The Sullivan I knew wouldn't be talking like this. The Sullivan you knew was wrong about a lot of things, Sullivan said quietly. And if you're honest with yourself, you know it too. Mike walked out of the break room without another word. Sullivan stood alone, realizing that changing himself might cost him friendships. But he thought about Maya's words. Actions matter more than intentions. He couldn't just read articles and feel bad about his past. He had to actually change his behavior even when it was hard. 2 weeks later, Sullivan was at home when his phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number. Hello? Officer Sullivan. This is Marcus Chen from Channel 7 News. I'm doing a story about the incident at Memorial Hospital, and I'd like to get your comment. Sullivan's blood ran cold. How did you get my number? I'm a reporter, sir. It's my job to find people. So is it true that you made racist comments to the nurse who saved your life? I have no comment, Sullivan said, his hand shaking. We're running the story tonight with or without your input. I just thought you might want to tell your side. Sullivan hung up. He immediately called Sarah at work. Honey, we need to talk. The news knows about what happened. They're running a story tonight. That evening, Sullivan sat with his family as the news report aired. The reporter didn't use Maya's name, but he told the story. A black nurse who saved the life of a white police officer who had made racist comments to her. The report praised Maya's professionalism and raised questions about racism in law enforcement. Sophie, his 15-year-old, turned to look at him. Dad, is that about you? Sullivan couldn't lie to his daughter. Yes. You said racist things to someone who was trying to save your life. Sophie's voice was filled with disbelief and disappointment. Yes, I did. And I'm not proud of it. I'm ashamed. Emma, his 13-year-old, started crying. Why would you do that? That's horrible. Sullivan felt tears in his own eyes. You're right. It is horrible. And I'm sorry you had to find out this way. I'm sorry for a lot of things. Over the next few days, the story spread. It was picked up by national news outlets. Social media exploded with opinions. Some people called Maya a hero. Others criticized her, saying she should have refused to treat Sullivan. Some people defended Sullivan, saying he was in pain and couldn't be held responsible for his words. Others called for him to be fired. Maya's phone wouldn't stop ringing. Reporters wanted interviews. Her hospital wanted her to do a press conference. People she hadn't talked to in years were suddenly reaching out. She ignored most of it. But the criticism from her own community hurt the most. At church that Sunday, an older woman named Mrs. Patterson pulled her aside. I heard what you did saving that racist cop. Child, why would you help someone like that? Because it's my job, Mrs. Patterson. I'm a nurse. Your job is to help your own people first. That man would have let you die without blinking. Maya felt tired. So tired. If I only help people who would help me back, what does that make me? How am I any different from him? Mrs. Patterson shook her head. You're too forgiving, child. This world will eat you alive if you keep giving chances to people who don't deserve them. Later that week, Maya was at home when there was a knock at her door. She opened it to find a young black woman, maybe 25 years old, standing on her porch. Can I help you? Maya asked. Are you Maya Thompson? The nurse from the news? Yes. The woman's eyes filled with tears. I just wanted to say thank you. My brother was shot by police 3 years ago. He survived but barely. And I've been so angry since then. Angry at all cops, angry at the system, angry at everything. She wiped her eyes. But seeing what you did, how you treated that officer with dignity even when he didn't deserve it, it reminded me that holding on to hate was destroying me. It wasn't hurting them. It was hurting me. Maya felt her own throat tighten with emotion. I'm glad I could help somehow. You did more than help. You showed me a different way. Thank you. After the woman left, Maya sat down on her couch and finally let herself cry. Not tears of sadness, but tears of exhaustion and relief and hope. Maybe this whole painful experience would lead to something good after all. 3 months had passed since the night Maya saved Sullivan's life. The news stories had died down, though the incident still came up occasionally on social media. Both of their lives had changed in ways neither of them could have predicted. Sullivan stood in the community center in the East Side neighborhood, setting up chairs for a meeting. It was his day off, but he had volunteered to help with a program that brought police officers and community members together for honest conversations. This was part of his new assignment, the community outreach work Captain Rodriguez had mandated. Need some help with those? A young man approached, probably in his early 20s. He was black, wearing a college sweatshirt. Sure, thanks, Sullivan said. Together they set up the last few rows of chairs. I'm Deshaun, the young man said, extending his hand. James, Sullivan replied, shaking it. He noticed Deshaun hesitate when he saw the police uniform. You nervous about tonight? Deshaun asked, a little. These conversations aren't always easy. No, they're not. But they're necessary. Deshaun paused. Hey, are you the cop from that news story? The one about the nurse? Sullivan felt his face grow hot. Yeah, that's me. He expected Deshaun to walk away, to look at him with disgust. Instead, the young man nodded slowly. Takes courage to show up here after that. To keep showing up. I'm just trying to do better, Sullivan said. That's all any of us can do, right? Try to be better than we were yesterday. As people filled the community center that evening, Sullivan saw familiar faces and new ones. There was Mrs. Johnson, who ran the local food bank, Pastor Williams from the Baptist church, several other police officers from his department, and teenagers, parents, elderly folks, all coming together to talk about police relations in their neighborhood. The facilitator, a woman named Dr. Harper who specialized in community dialogue, opened the meeting. Tonight we're here to listen to each other. Not to debate or defend, but to understand. Who would like to start? A woman in her 50s raised her hand. My son was pulled over 6 times last year. 6 times. And every time he was just driving home from work. He's never gotten a ticket, never done anything wrong. But he gets pulled over constantly. Sullivan felt his stomach twist. How many times had he done exactly that? Pulled someone over for driving in the wrong neighborhood without any real cause? Another person spoke up, then another. Stories of being followed in stores, of having police called on them for being in their own neighborhoods, of being treated like criminals before they even opened their mouths. Sullivan listened, really listened, and each story felt like a weight being added to his chest. When there was a pause, Sullivan raised his hand. His heart was pounding. Yes, officer, Dr. Harper said. Sullivan stood up, his legs shaky. My name is Officer James Sullivan, and I need to say something. He looked around the room. I'm the cop from that news story. The one who said racist things to the nurse who saved my life. And I'm here tonight because I'm trying to change. But listening to all of you, I realize I need to do more than just try. I need to be honest about the harm I've caused. The room was completely silent now. I've pulled people over for no good reason. I've made assumptions based on skin color. I've been part of the problem you're all describing. His voice cracked. And I'm sorry. I know sorry isn't enough, but it's where I have to start. An older man in the back stood up. So what are you going to do about it now? I'm here, aren't I? Sullivan said. I'm listening. I'm learning. And when I go back to work, I'm going to do things differently. I'm going to call out other officers when they're wrong. I'm going to treat every person I encounter with the respect they deserve. Words are easy, the man said. Actions are hard. You're right, Sullivan agreed. So judge me by my actions. Hold me accountable. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking for a chance to prove I can be better. After the meeting ended, several people approached Sullivan. Some to express skepticism, others to express cautious hope. Deshaun clapped him on the shoulder. That took guts, man. Keep showing up. As Sullivan drove home that night, he felt exhausted but also lighter. He thought about Maya, wondered how she was doing, if she knew that he was trying to honor the second chance she had given him. Maya, meanwhile, was at home helping her son Jerome with his homework. He was working on a history project about the civil rights movement. "Mom, did people really have to fight just to be treated like people?" Jerome asked, looking at photos of protests and segregation in his textbook. "Yes, baby. They did. That's not fair. No, it's not. But brave people fought to make things better. And we have to keep fighting in our own ways to make things even better for your generation." Jerome thought about that. "Is that why you saved that police officer? Even though he was mean to you?" Maya had talked to her son about what happened in age-appropriate terms. She wanted him to understand without filling him with hate. "Yes, because I believe people can change. And if I give up on that belief, then what's the point of anything?" "Do you think he changed?" Jerome asked. "I don't know yet. But I hope so." The next day, Maya received an unexpected phone call at work. It was from a local organization called Bridge Builders, a group that worked to improve relations between police and communities of color. "Ms. Thompson, my name is Angela Martinez. I'm the director of Bridge Builders. We're organizing a training session for police officers focused on implicit bias and community relations. We'd like to invite you to speak, to share your story and your perspective." Maya's first instinct was to say no. She had already been through so much attention, so much scrutiny. But then she thought about that young woman who had come to her door, thanking her for showing a different way. Who else would be speaking? Maya asked. "We've got several community members, a psychologist who specializes in bias, and actually, Officer Sullivan has volunteered to participate as well." Maya was quiet for a moment. "Officer Sullivan asked to be part of this?"
"Yes, he's been working with us for the past few months."
"He's been very committed to the program." "Okay," Maya said. "I'll do it." 2 weeks later, Maya walked into the police training center. Her hands were sweaty and her heart was racing. She saw Sullivan across the room talking to another officer. When he saw her, he excused himself and walked over. "Maya, thank you for coming. I wasn't sure you would." "I wasn't sure I would either," Maya admitted. They stood there awkwardly for a moment. 3 months had passed since their conversation in his hospital room. So much had happened since then. "I've been following the news about the program you're doing," Maya said. "The community outreach." "Yeah. It's been eye-opening, humbling. I had no idea how much damage I'd done, how many people I'd hurt over the years." "Are you really changing? Or is this just for show?" Maya asked directly. Sullivan looked her in the eye. "I'm trying. Some days are harder than others. I catch myself having old thoughts, old reactions, but I stop myself now. I question why I'm thinking what I'm thinking, and I'm learning to see people differently, to see them as individuals, not as stereotypes." "That's good," Maya said. "But you know you're going to have to keep doing that every day for the rest of your life, right? This isn't something you fix and then forget about." "I know. Believe me, I know." Sullivan paused. "Can I tell you something?" "What?" "My daughter Emma, the 13-year-old. She joined her school's diversity club. And the other day she was telling me about her friend Keisha, who's black. Emma was so angry about something that happened to Keisha at the mall, how security followed her around like she was going to steal something. And watching my daughter stand up for her friend, watching her see that injustice clearly, it made me realize what I almost taught her, what kind of father I almost was." Maya felt a lump form in her throat. "Your daughter sounds like a good kid." "She is. Better than I deserve." Sullivan's eyes were shiny with unshed tears. "You gave me more than my life back, Maya. You gave me a chance to be the father my daughters deserve, the husband my wife deserves, the person I should have been all along." Before Maya could respond, Angela Martinez called everyone to order. The training session was about to begin. Maya spoke first, telling her story. She talked about the night Sullivan came into the emergency room, about the choice she had to make, about the weight of treating someone with dignity even when they denied hers. She saw some officers nodding, others looking uncomfortable, a few with tears in their eyes. Then Sullivan spoke. He didn't make excuses or downplay what he had done. He was honest about his upbringing, his beliefs, and how they had affected his work. He was honest about the harm he had caused. And he was honest about the work he was still doing to change. "I'm not standing here as someone who has it all figured out," Sullivan said. "I'm standing here as someone who finally realized how much he didn't know, how much he had to learn. And I'm asking you all to look at your own biases, your own assumptions, because if we don't, we're going to keep hurting people. We're going to keep breaking the trust that communities need to have in us. After both of them spoke, the room opened up for questions and discussion. It was raw and difficult and uncomfortable. Some officers were defensive. Others were thoughtful. But everyone was engaged, and that was something. During the break, Maya and Sullivan stood outside getting some air. "Do you think we're making a difference?" Sullivan asked. Maya watched the officers inside, some in heated discussion, others sitting quietly with thoughtful expressions. "I think we're planting seeds. Whether they grow or not depends on whether people water them." "That's very philosophical," Sullivan said with a small smile. "I've had a lot of time to think these past few months." Maya turned to look at him. "You know, when I walked into your hospital room that day, I didn't want to be there. I was so angry at you. You had every right to be, but somewhere during that conversation I realized something. Hate is exhausting. It takes so much energy to carry around, and I decided I didn't want to carry it anymore." Maya took a deep breath. "So I'm not going to say I forgive you because I'm not sure that's mine to give. But I will say that I see you trying, and that counts for something." Sullivan nodded, blinking back tears. "That means more to me than you know. Just don't stop trying. Don't let this be something you did for a few months and then forgot about. The world needs people who are willing to do the hard work of changing themselves." "I won't stop," Sullivan promised. "I can't. Every time I put on this uniform, I think about you. About that night. About the grace you showed me. And I think, don't waste this chance." They stood together in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the sun set over the city. Two people from different worlds brought together by a moment of crisis, now working together to make things better. "You know what I hope?" Maya said finally. "What?" "I hope that one day my son won't have to worry about being pulled over for no reason. I hope he'll live in a world where people like you see him as just a kid, not a threat, where he doesn't have to be twice as good to be seen as half as worthy." "I hope that too," Sullivan said, "and I'm going to do everything I can to help build that world." Maya looked at him and saw sincerity in his eyes. She saw someone who had been broken down and was building himself back up, differently, better. She saw someone who understood that redemption wasn't a destination but a journey that lasted a lifetime. Then, maybe this whole terrible experience will lead to something good after all, Maya said. That evening, as Maya drove home, she thought about the path that had led her here, the pain, the anger, the exhaustion of constantly fighting to be seen as fully human, but also the hope, the possibility that people could change, that grace could transform hate into understanding. She thought about her grandmother, who had lived through worse and still chose love over bitterness. She thought about her son, and the world she was helping to build for him. She thought about all the nurses who would come after her, who might face similar situations and would need to make similar choices. When she got home, Jerome was waiting at the door. "Mom, I got an A on my history project." Maya hugged her son tight, breathing in his little boy smell of grass and soap. "I'm so proud of you, baby. The teacher said my essay about brave people making the world better was really good. I wrote about you, Mom, about how you're brave." Maya felt tears spring to her eyes. "Baby, I'm just doing my job." "No, you're doing more than that. You're making things better. That's what brave people do." Later that night, after Jerome was asleep, Maya sat on her back porch looking at the stars. Her phone buzzed with a text message. It was from an unknown number. "This is Officer Sullivan. I hope it's okay that I'm texting you. I just wanted to say thank you again for today, for everything. You changed my life, and I'm going to spend the rest of it trying to be worthy of that gift." Maya thought about responding, then decided to let the message stand on its own. Words were easy. Actions were what mattered. Time would tell if Sullivan's transformation was real. But sitting there under the stars, Maya allowed herself to feel something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Hope that people could change. Hope that the hard conversations could lead to understanding. Hope that the next generation, kids like Jerome and Emma, might grow up in a world that was a little bit better than the one she had inherited. She had saved Sullivan's life that night in the emergency room. But in some ways, he had saved something in her too. He had reminded her why she became a nurse in the first place. Not just to heal bodies, but to believe in the possibility of healing hearts and minds as well. The journey ahead was long. The work was hard. The progress was slow. But it was progress nonetheless. And sometimes that was enough. Maya stood up, stretched, and went inside to her family. Tomorrow she would go back to the hospital and save more lives. She would keep showing up, keep doing the work, keep believing in the possibility that even the hardest hearts could soften, even the deepest hate could give way to understanding, because that's what grace looked like. Not forgetting the hurt or pretending it didn't happen, but refusing to let it define the future. Not ignoring the hard truth of racism and its impacts, but believing that people could face those truths and choose to be better. And in a small police station across town, Sullivan was making his own promises. To show up every day, to challenge his own assumptions, to be the kind of officer, the kind of father, the kind of man that his second chance demanded he become. 2 lives, forever changed by one night in an emergency room. 2 people, learning what it meant to see each other's full humanity, and a small seed of hope, planted in the hardest of soil, beginning to grow.